Hari Om, and Hari Om to all online participants now and later. So, I think we can continue with our theme, the trust that liberates, and pick up also from where we were yesterday, where I mentioned, especially with the question, why does grace find it necessary to visit us with difficulties, obstacles, and sometimes very painful or agonizing types of experiences. So much of what I'll say will be repetition, but I'm hoping it'll put a stamp on it because there's some kind of powerful readings and quotes that can be very meaningful to us, I think. And but to start the topic, yes, because the truth is, we all know trust plays a huge role in our spiritual life. I don't think anybody has to tell us that. It's the difficulty in doing it, and the difficulty in applying the truth under all circumstances. That's where the challenge comes. So, at any rate, I thought just to start off with a question that was asked of me recently. I was told that there was a person, very beautiful person, young, very loving family, who as a child underwent a very abusive type of experience. And she underwent therapy, seemingly got over it. But later in life, she went through a crisis of meaning. So went back to therapy again, and was just coming out of that, maybe had her first day where she was really happy, and then something horrible happened, and it triggered the trauma of childhood again. And so the person asked me, why? Why does this happen? And of course, this is something very, very difficult to answer because we don't really totally understand the ways of the infinite. That's why so much trust is required. But I did say, you see, it's quite possible the therapy didn't uproot that trauma or didn't enable her to transcend that trauma. So it had to come up again. And these types of things may have to reappear until they are transcended. So that was the answer that I gave, but it more than anything got me thinking about, again, why is it that grace has to visit us with these difficult experiences? And two answers actually came to mind. Because what I did was I actually looked into my own experience, which, of course, I see as very impersonal. I don't take it personally. So I'm not saying it's absolutely universal. Everybody has to decide for themselves. But in looking in my own experience, what I could see is that the identification with the body and mind is so tenacious that even, as we progress in the spiritual life, more and more the grip is being loosened. We may even have periods where the grip is completely freed. But what we find is that sooner or later we revert back to the same identification. So it's like grace has to keep on waking us up and showing us, because as Swamiji said, we are very reluctant, or we have difficulty in really seeing and acknowledging that there is a higher power, a higher intelligence, that surrendering to which alone we come out of the darkness, surrendering to which alone we free ourselves from ourselves, because it is the self, realizing the self. So that was one possibility just because of the tenaciousness of the identification. And grace wants to take us to the point where we're no longer identified with the body and mind, and beautiful experiences just are not sufficient for that, as much as we would much prefer them. And second reason is that suffering, offer the pain to the Lord. This is a great teaching. Even the deepest pain or miserable emotion, a profound oneness happens. The very suffering becomes transformed as samadhi. Now, if that hasn't happened, or God taking the form of this suffering, has tremendous liberating potential. It wasn't the ecstasy part, it was really the fact of it, the emphasis used ourselves intellectually to face it. We become powerless. Spiritual seeker knows that every suffering is sent from a divine source in order to purify him or her. They are, in fact, overjoyed to surrender themselves to suffering. Well, we may not be overjoyed, but we'll accept it. It is a proven fact that no amount of self-initiated spiritual practice can purify us like God-given suffering. No profound way of looking at it. And the liberating potential is very profound. Allow it to consume your ego by becoming one with it. This is what is meant by offering the suffering, gives so much encouragement and as I said, the liberating power of that. And we may not know it, but it can start with faith in the fact, trust in the fact of the scriptures and our own experience, because it will suit all, down to the obstacles and difficulties that we normally face in life. But there are a couple of, and the first one I thought to discuss was something that Swami Brahmanandaji said in class one day. He says, you can be sitting for meditation, everything is going fine, good meditation, peace, and then all of a sudden, a memory comes of some past remote sin. And the mind makes an absolute mountain out of a molehill. And he says, this is where you have to be able to apply the truth. Or another thing that can happen is that we think we've overcome something, and this can have beginning, middle, and end, an avalanche of really ugly thoughts or emotions, whatever way we would define them, depending on our culture and our gender and all of that. And what can happen here is that we can get very discouraged. And Swami Chidanandaji, this is where it's good to have faith in his words, has said that discouragement is the most deceptive trick. We've had failures or whatever, we think it is only proper that we should be feeling terrible about it and be discouraged. But ashram, and it's not the higher Christian teachings. And because what can happen is it can spiral down. It starts with discouragement, and then we begin to think, I'll never reach the goal. I'm hopeless. I'm the worst thing that walked this earth. I might as well leave the path. I mean, it can spiral, and depression and despair can take over, and a huge amount of time can be wasted until, thank God, grace intervenes. But the point of teachings, and in our own experience, but right now I'll just say some of the teachings. One of the most important things for us to remember if this is something that happens, is that it is the self that we already are that is calling its portion to detach from the body and mind. And that's what ego, you understand what I mean. So liberation is not for the ego, it is from the ego. And so that big drama has nothing to do with liberation. It's not going to be liberated anyway. So that is number one. Now, in a very devotional way, in that last talk that I mentioned yesterday, in The Truth That Liberates, Swamiji has said, once we have been called, which of course has to be including everybody here and anybody, we will never be, the self or God will never abandon us. So I think, because would even, as Jesus would say, would an earthly parent abandon its own child? A good one. A good earthly parent abandon its own child. It's not possible. That which is unconditional love. So that's another aspect. And we could also draw on some of the Christian teachings, because we are, it is a Christmas retreat. And that is good to reconcile all mankind to God. In other words, through the death of Jesus on the cross, all mankind became one with God. In addition, it's like it happened in history. And in addition, all sins are forgiven from the beginning of time until the end of time, provided we believe it. I mean, if we don't believe, it's still a fact, but if we don't believe it, it has no liberating power. But Swamiji often will use biblical examples when he's talking about this, biblical passages. So there was one great Quaker saint, which was a mystical branch of Christianity. And this great Quaker says, and it's especially, in relation, if you have, interesting. First of all, the first thing she said is bad thoughts, temptations and all that are not sin. And she's very old-fashioned, belonged to the 19th century. And she asked the devil to send those things up, so we turn to him. So the thing is, grace is behind all of this. So we don't need to worry about our thoughts. Even Swami Chidanandaji said, mental sin in Kali Yuga, it's an excerpt in A Call to Liberation, mental sin is not counted against us in Kali Yuga. He ends up saying, otherwise God knows where we would all be, and he included himself in that. So I've heard Swamiji, I didn't hear this myself, but I heard that he said, could ever meet. So he says, I also have selfishness, but my relationship to it is different, because he's disidentified with it. For it. And, but what this Quaker saint said, what if we have sinned? What if we have done something? I mean, it's really true. Then, 2 steps. 1, acknowledge it. And 2, immediately, don't let any time go by, claim your forgiveness based on Jesus' death on the cross. So, I mean, this is a Christian thing, but it's universally applicable. So we don't have to waste any time spiraling downwards because of mistakes or anything like that. She says, acknowledge it, claim your forgiveness, and carry on. Apologize, boy, that's a very, very helpful way to completely clean and purify the atmosphere. So, and I'll tell you another story which is quite amusement. Somebody was doing a puja in our temple, and this person was really feeling the stillness as that, because it's very powerful. And like that, it is the puja that's invoking that, the same stillness in us, and feeling the purity of it and the refinement of the atmosphere. And the person was doing it, and then all of a sudden some horrible thoughts came. And that person looked at those thoughts and, what are you doing here? You're polluting this beautiful. And then they were there and went. But the one thing that person recognized is that stillness, which is really the perfume of the self, let alone the self, being untouched by those slew of ugly thoughts. So I think this is really, really helpful for us, provided we really trust. And it's not just, again, trust in the scriptures, trust in what the teachers have shared with us, and trust in our own experience when it's been proven. That's a second thing that can really pull us away from our self, with a capital S. And then there is one other thing I thought to mention, and that is fear and its very close relatives, anxiety experience, anxiety a little less so, and fear a little less so, but worry is something very chronic. All three of them, and especially worry, usually always has some object that you're worried about something very specific, or have anxiety about something, or fear about something. With anxiety and fear, it's not always about something, so I'll get to that later. But say it is worry about something, anxiety about something. I just want to read something to you. This is from the calendar that was brought out in Swami Chidanandaji's centenary, and every day of the month. And of course, when I knew the theme, my antennas are always up for whatever can be helpful for us. So, on September 10th, and this is what Swamiji says: worry presupposes a basic lack of faith in the intelligence, goodness, being. If you trust in that being and know that he is always with you, and his plan for you is only for your highest good, then this trust will make worry superfluous. Then he says, this is somewhere else, one who trusts this being and depends upon him, there is no room for anxiety before you call, because that, of course, is the ideal. And maybe even as spiritual seekers, when we remember this and practice. But where we can find it really difficult is if the worry is about a loved one, somebody that we're very, very attached to. And there's no way that Swamiji would be saying this so that we would worry about being worried. So this is where we can bring Nocherji's, what he said in it. Apply what he said, that even the worry is God. Even the worry is a manifestation of our own consciousness and trust. Then there is a chance, these are the words that came to me, there's a chance that the worry will be drained out. Makes sense, but the energy of the worry will slowly be drained out. So the worry is there because, again, it's not so much that we have to get rid of these things, it's so that we have dispassion for them. So we're not totally pulled away from our center and lost in these things. So there are different ways. Swamiji, it's wonderful and very potent what Swamiji said, that's why I wanted to share it. It's not always possible. If it's especially when it comes to a loved one. So I thought no church teaching was very helpful. I think we would find that worry is always very specific. We're worried about something, a loved one, ourselves, our loved one, our money, or whatever it is. But anxiety and fear, where we have really no idea where they're coming. They just appear. And of course, when it comes to fear, and this would be more if something specific, so I'll get to when it doesn't have something specific. When it comes to fear, you know, when they talk about there's nothing to fear. They talk about it as being absolutely fearless state. And I'll share with you a experience I had. It was a dream I had way back, probably came out of that light, saying, "Fear not, it is I, only in one of my more fearful abodes." I think more fearful. So it is a dream's expression of that non-dual truth, even the most fearful thing. And it's in line again with what Noshirji, we're very attracted to that. We want to go there, and yet, for absolutely no apparent reason, anxiety comes, fear comes. And we can't understand it by something that, again, Swami Chidanandaji has said, and that is, and maybe behind so much of our fear and anxiety, is the reluctance, also in Ponder These Truths, in a talk called The Arjuna Complex. But and there's another one, Companion Garden of Gethsemane, just before his crucifixion. And Swamiji suggested it was this fear of letting go of that final interpretation of the symbolism of that. And same even with Lord Buddha, when he's challenged again on the night before his enlightenment. Again, why Swami Brahmanandaji talked about that faith that is necessary in the last step. But again, if we look at our own experience, I decided again to look at when this fear comes, it is almost entirely, it doesn't come and say, you're afraid of letting go of the I. It will come in more distracting ways. And this is again where trust is so important, because the final is letting total go of control. I mean, we are one. So that may explain, and just to remember, I also asked Swamiji once, because some people would speak about a fear reaching an abyss and then feel this tremendous fear. And Swamiji said that not everybody experiences this, but some people will. So again, it's to have trust in these words of assurance when anxiety or fear or worry. So much of our spiritual life is getting rid of negativity. Doesn't mean it doesn't appear, but he said, dismissing it as nothing. It's also easy when we're in the grip of these things, but again, and to trust. That's another place, where trust is really, really important. To trust grace will bring us whatever tool we need to transcend. And there is another approach that we can take. It is more the Gyani approach. What has been said before is a little bit more on the devotionally open to us. But it is to have the presence of mind and the trust to remain as the witness. Because as the witness, or the pure sense of I am, which is immediately recognizable, and we know is part of the universal soul, the part. Jivatma is non-different from Paramatma, but as a witness, It is part of it. It cannot be touched. And if we can remain as the witness, if we have the presence of the mind and the trust to remain there, being tempted by, it can be the most beautiful thing, that comes in the form of these sages, they would be tempted by the most beautiful damsels and so forth. Anyways, it can be a desire that is extremely tempting and extremely ferocious, or, maybe the better word, or it can be something very, very painful. Whatever it is, when we remain as the witness, or as the I am, we put ourselves there, because where we are as the I am, then we can see, no matter what it is an object to us. And therefore, it cannot be who we are. It can be this close. It can be that close, but there's still a distance. Because we know it, it is an object. And who we are, no matter how intense it may be. And again, if we can stay there and trust that whatever it is that's assailing, it has come. We're there. This thing has come. It is going to gradually peak, plateau. So what that means, whatever comes, remains, and goes, spiritual terminology is not considered real. So neither is it ourself, nor is it real. So that's why Swamiji says, you dismiss it as nothing. You are able to do this, practice based on, again, the scriptures, what the teachers, great teachers have shared. Then this practice based on faith and based on reflecting on the implications of both the scriptures and our experience, the implication of life. Slowly, slowly, we are going to become, as Swamiji used, an instrument or wisdom of our true self. It'll come and go, but we'll become an instrument of those things. And to get through that roadblock. But in addition to that, life itself, I think we know if we are members of the Divine Life Society or Shivananda Ashram, importance they put on our life. Swami Atmasrupananda once said, there's a reason that Gurudev called this the Divine Life Society rather than the realized have any transforming power. It has to ripen into being and doing being the best part of knowledge. But the beauty is of that, and the beauty of the non-dual teachings here is that they bring that non-dual truth which to our most mundane level. And which was, again, one of the reasons that I myself found that Sri Rupa, you see, it applies to all things. It's seeing God in all forms. It's breaking it right down to where we live. And Nochaji also spoke about, there's a Upanishadic, it says, I'm using my words, are actually borrowing from Swamiji. God is in that infant in the mother's arm, the mother, the father, the toddler person tottering with a stick. You see, right down to where we live. And I've said this many times because I love this. Swamiji brought the prayer, you are as everything. So you are also my shelter. You are also my clothing. You are also my food. So that the non-dual truth is brought right down to where we are functioning from. So it makes, we all, people in the world, but even us in the ashram, say, well, I have no time, and I'm completely distracted. But I was thinking about, to affirm the truth, Lord, you're coming to in this form, and reject the untruth, you're coming in the form of this really irritating person. To affirm the truth, and then you can set on it dings, just one sound, duh, duh. And anyways, we can do that, every few hours, and then a little ding comes, and it just will remind us to remember. I love this saying, it is time to remember God. And Alan, who did the paintings in our Samadhi hall, he actually sign painted above the clocks. It may not be for us affirming the truth, it's whatever suits us. It could be repeating God's name the way, and with a little understanding, the way Swami Yogasrupanandaji interpret. There's going to be space there where we can take a few breaths, just bring our attention to our sense of being, the sense of being that pervades, the universal being also pervades our whole body, sense of being inside our body. And know that that same sense of being is pervading everywhere, pervading everybody at that board room table. So they're all anytime. It's just the will. We just have to want to do it. But these opportunities are there for us. And Swamiji say, if you forget 10 times, remember 10 times. If you forget 100 times, remember 1,000 times. And he also gave a talk called The Land of 10,000 Awakenings. So it's something that we have to keep on doing. And what if no life in this? It's boring. It has no meaning. It's dead. And but if, 3 things to say about that. If it's our own, if we've seen it. And that is the meaning when Richard Rohr said, faith is remembering in the darkness, in that light. Then bring it when the spiritual experience is not there, the darkness. Now, it may not be pitch darkness, but we're not in it at that moment. So bring into the light. So that will be infusing that whatever we're affirming with trust. The remembrance of what we saw in the light when we're in the so-called darkness. And what was I going to say? Because he came from a very strong moral, ethical background. And so for his modum operandi would affirm the truth because it is the truth. And who wants to live a lie? So again, if we have faith in what we have seen, in experience, but just because it's true. And this is especially valuable if we've had some glimpse of it. But, and this leads to the final point about this, is that it can be really helpful to remember what the Gita says, the desire for the fruit. So we do our spiritual practice, even if it's for a few seconds, remembering grace has even brought it to our memory, and we're not. You just do it because it's right. And as Swami Brahmanandaji has said, when somebody said, I want to experience God, as I said yesterday, he says, you're experiencing nothing but God. So we can remember, if it seems boring and dead, then we can remember what Swami Brahmanandaji has also said. But there's one other thing I wanted to share, because, or maybe a few, that one of the great places where we can actually remember the truth, again, this is something that Richard Rohr had said I was listening to. I'm maybe changing his words, but somehow it brings on meditative types of thoughts. And he gave the reason for it. And unfortunately, and I forget the reason he said. But when he said it, I said, oh my God, that is also my experience. Well, I'm not driving. I'm in a, always in a three-ish. And, but a close friend of ours also said, whenever he is driving a car, meditative thoughts automatically come. Now, it occurred to me, maybe it's because our overthinking mind goes into the background when we're in a moving vehicle. And especially if you're driving, the intuitive mind takes over. Because if we're overthinking, I think we'll have an accident. So it is, and you see, it's really to take advantage through all the nonsense, or look at the news, but to be quiet and take advantage of this. And it's especially potent. If you go on a three-wheeler from the ashram, wonder how you didn't get. You could be a string of donkeys, and then a cow. We're going to be about ourselves. Our attention is no longer going to be on this. It is just going to dissipate, and then all the energy is freed to serve. And I've mentioned this a number of times. Swamiji asked, what is it that made Gurudeva's service so extraordinary? And he answered the question himself. And he said, it was because Gurudev could not think of himself. So that is the potential. That is the potential of trust permeating our whole life, our whole spiritual life, is that eventually, especially if we're part of this Shivananda Divine Life Society, that we become embodiments of the truth. That potential is there for all of us. And even if you don't belong to the Divine Life yet, we hope soon, then still, when you're practicing the spiritual life, whatever tradition you're following, whatever ashram, then the energy gets freed up for the benefit of all. So, Hari Om Tat Sat, and